In 2026, the US military could launch a major attack on a country, while actively working to help that country's citizens overthrow their own government. This isn't a contradiction, it's the new blueprint for power. Forget the headlines, follow the logic. Let's find the strategy in the system. Chapter 1: The shield is gone. For decades, the central fear of any conflict with Iran was escalation. It wasn't just about Iran, it was about its network, the so-called axis of resistance. A strike on Tehran risked triggering Hezbollah rockets from Lebanon militias in Iraq and the full force of the Syrian regime. That could turn a targeted operation into a regional inferno. But by 2026, that foundational assumption is obsolete. The regional shield has shattered. Let's look at the map. Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy, entered 2026 severely degraded after a massive conflict in late 2024. Its arsenal is depleted. Its forces are battered. More critically, the Assad regime in Syria, Iran's essential land bridge to the Mediterranean and Hezbollah, fell in December 2024. That corridor for moving weapons, money and advisors is now closed. Iran is geographically isolated in a way it hasn't been since the 1980s. This changes the military calculus completely. The US isn't looking at a sprawling, multi-front war anymore. It's looking at a contained target. The traditional escalation ladder, where Iran responds through its proxies, has several key rungs missing. This allows for a different kind of operation, one that's sharper, faster, and aimed not just at military infrastructure, but at the political core of the regime itself. But if the external shield is broken, what's holding the regime up? The answer lies within its own borders, and it's far more fragile than it appears. Chapter 2: The internal clock. While the external network crumbled, a parallel crisis was boiling inside Iran. By early 2026, the country is in the throes of what's being called the Winter Revolution. This isn't a sporadic protest, it's a nationwide upheaval touching all 31 provinces, fueled by an economic collapse so severe it makes previous crises look mild. The numbers tell the story: an 84% crash in the value of the Iranian rial, and food inflation hitting 70%. This isn't just hardship, it's the breakdown of the social contract. When basic sustenance is out of reach, the ideological legitimacy of the state evaporates. Here's where the 2026 scenario diverges radically from past forever wars. The US isn't contemplating an invasion to install a new government, it's looking at a strategy of regime change management. The goal isn't to conquer territory, but to accelerate an internal collapse that's already underway. Think of it as applying precision pressure to a structure already buckling under its own weight. The military objective isn't to defeat the Iranian army in the field, it's to sever the neural connections of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. That's the regime's Praetorian Guard. The goal is to hit them at the exact moment its population is in open revolt. This leads to a bizarre, almost surreal strategic reality. One arm of the US government would be conducting kinetic strikes, bombing command centers, missile sites, drone factories. Simultaneously, another arm, likely US Cyber Command, would be executing an operation with the opposite tactical goal: restoring connectivity. They'd be trying to punch through the regime's $37 million a day internet blackout to get information to the Iranian people. The idea is to empower protesters while blinding the IRGC's own communications. So the real battlefield isn't the desert or the Strait of Hormuz. It's the smartphone. It's the narrative. The war is fought with missiles in the air and packets of data on the ground. But this delicate, dual-pronged strategy rests on one terrifying gamble: that the regime will follow a predictable script in its death throes, and that is an assumption you should never, ever make. Chapter 3: The Last Card. Let's stress test the US premise. The plan is to apply overwhelming, precise force to decapitate the IRGC's command while fueling the public uprising. The goal is a relatively clean internal takeover by opposition forces. A neat surgical collapse, but regimes, especially revolutionary ones, facing existential threats, do not exit neatly. They lash out, and Iran has one last devastating card to play: the total closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't just another tactical response, it's an existential one. The strait is the world's most critical oil choke point. About 20% of global oil trade passes through it. A closure wouldn't be permanent, the US Fifth Fleet would break it. But even a disruption of weeks could send oil prices soaring past $150 a barrel. That would trigger a global inflationary shock and a probable recession. For the Iranian leadership, it's the ultimate if we go down, we take the global economy with us move. It transforms their defeat from a national event into a worldwide crisis. This threat has always been in the background, but in 226, it's more credible than ever. Why? Because the regime's usual off-ramps are gone. In the past, they could calibrate a response, harass some shipping, attack a Saudi oil facility to signal resolve without triggering a full-scale war. But in this 2026 scenario, the US action is explicitly designed for regime termination. There is no off-ramp. The vise is tightening from the inside and the outside. When you corner a regime and systematically demonstrate you seek its end, you force it to consider every weapon in its arsenal, no matter how destructive. This is where the management part of regime change falls apart. You cannot manage a player who decides to flip the board over. The closure of Hormuz is a non-linear event. It immediately drags in every economy on Earth, from Europe to China to India, turning a regional conflict into a desperate global scramble for energy. It would force Gulf states, terrified of being Iran's retaliation targets, into a brutal public alignment with the US and Israel. You'd see a new Middle East security pact forged in a moment of extreme panic, and this exposes the central miscalculation, believing you can control the endgame of a collapsing state. The US may have the perfect plan to break Iran's military and aid its protesters, but it has no plan for the 48 hours after the Supreme Council decides it has nothing left to lose. Chapter 4: The New Rules of Power. So, what actually changes in global power if the US attacks Iran in 2026? The answer isn't about who wins the war. It's about the new rules of engagement that the war reveals. First, geography is no longer a guarantee of security. Iran spent billions and decades building a proxy network across the region, a strategic depth. It was wiped out by events in Lebanon and Syria in a matter of months. Your alliances are only as strong as their weakest regime. This lesson is now being studied in every capital from Pyongyang to Moscow. Second, the battlefield is now hybrid by default. The fusion of kinetic warfare, bombs, and informational warfare, like internet restoration, isn't an innovation anymore. It's the baseline. The objective is no longer just to destroy the enemy's army, but to manipulate the enemy's society in real time. The weapon is as likely to be a cyber tool that restores Twitter access as it is a Hellfire missile. Third, and most critically, the Maduro precedent has changed the cost-benefit analysis for pariah states. The successful capture of the Venezuelan leader in early 2026 sent a shockwave through regimes like Iran's. It proved the US was willing to move beyond sanctions and strikes to direct personal action against leadership. This makes a cornered regime more dangerous, not less. It removes the illusion of a comfortable exile. The endgame isn't a villa by the sea. It's a cell in The Hague. This dramatically raises the incentive to use every asymmetric tool available, like closing strategic choke points or launching uncontrolled cyber attacks. The ultimate shift in global power, then, is this. We are moving into an era of high-stakes, high-speed regime collapse management, where the greatest risk isn't the initial attack, but the terrifying inability to predict what a regime does in its final, desperate moments. The old model was invasion and occupation. The 2026 model is targeted acceleration of a failing state. It's cleaner, it's cheaper, and it avoids forever wars, but it trades the certainty of a messy occupation for the uncertainty of a global economic crisis, triggered by a single, panicked decision in Tehran. The world's greatest military power is now betting it can conduct the controlled demolition of a nation-state. And as any engineer will tell you, controlled demolitions only work if you perfectly understand the structure's internal stresses. The question for 2026 isn't whether the US can blow up the target, it's whether anyone truly understands what's inside. What's your bet?